to the WagerTalk Podcast for the week ending January 21st. We've got a big show this week as we've got William Bernanke from CG Analytics. He's going to join us to talk about where the money is going for this week's AFC and NFC Championship games. We're going to have Handicappers Corner, and of course, Ralph Michaels, Dave, Cokin, and myself are going to break down both games. We'll also have some college basketball for you. And in the final segment, of course, we will have our best bets. And I want to tell you guys real quick about a special offer. I'll go into bigger detail later, but I'm on a really nice run in basketball, and if you want to get a 7-day all-access package, just use coupon code MD79. That's MD79. You can pick up a week of service for instead of the normal price of $119, just $79 this week. That coupon will be good through Sunday. All right, guys, let's bring in our first guest of the night, and that is William Bernanke. William, how are you doing, my man?
Oh, I'm doing great, Marco. Hope you guys are caught your breath after last week's games.
It was, I'll be honest, it wasn't a good week for me. I made 2 plays last week, and I was on the wrong side of both games and looking for a little redemption this week. But the big question, Will, is how did you do? How did the house do last week?
Well, I'd have to say this is the first time that I can actually say with a straight face that with favorites winning, across the board, the house did well, and not, you wouldn't think I'm lying, because all the games, all the favorites winning. One favorite did not cover, and that, of course, was the Eagles, not the Eagles, the Saints, who were closed at 8.5 and only won by 6 with that missed field goal. But running down the game, game by game here, Chiefs winning and covering was a great result for us. I think we spoke about it last week. The Colts were, appearing to be a public dog, and that turned out to be even more so on the day of the game. And I think once we saw the first pass from Andrew Luck, where he looked like the cold was just affecting his hand, that the Colts were the wrong side right from the get-go. The Rams winning was a good result. This wasn't a great result, but pretty good. Money line bettors were taking Dallas, and the points were being, laid by the. Rams were a good result because the money line bettors were taking Dallas, so that really turned out well for us there. And of course, the best result of the weekend were the Patriots winning and covering, which also knocked out all the teasers on San Diego, or the L.A. Chargers. I still call them San Diego. Maybe they don't deserve to be called L.A. After what happened, and that wiped out all the teasers there. And, of course, the Eagles covering but not winning, along with the game actually going under, was a perfect result for us, like the perfect storm. That late missed field goal by Lutz was a real big swing for us. That was a 6-figure swing, that missed field goal.
With the surprising with all 4 home teams winning and all 4 favorites, winning the games outright, but like you said, the one didn't cover, you would think that there would have been a lot of money line parlays with those home teams, because I even know that, I don't know if you guys hung up this prop, but a lot of a couple places around town had props on would all 4 home teams win. You could bet the yes or no and different things, and a lot of players, I want to say your recreational players, they like those, just take favorites on the money line.
Yeah, that is a great prop, but we didn't actually hang that prop, but it would be good for the future. Certainly going to suggest it. But bettors were back in the underdogs on the money line, in the straight in the games, and then even on parlays, people taking a big shot, riding that trend of dogs winning outright. And we had a lot of money line underdog parlays, so those obviously were out the door right away. So we didn't have any problems with that.
Marco, let's remember prior to last week, all the buzz was the underdogs had been 14-1 in those playoffs. So, you had a lot of people looking at dog plays, like Will said. So, we know that's too small of a sample size for a sharp to put any notion into. But again, it was a well-publicized note that the dogs were on such a run. Yeah,
and I'll tell you, Will, we all watch the screens, and I'll be one of my losses last week. I was one of those guys on the Chargers. I thought the spot was right for them, even though all of the negatives that they had to overcome with the travel, and it was their 4th road game in 5 and 3 in a row, and warm weather team and cold, all of that. I chose to ignore. When I knew I had a loser in that game is about 45 minutes before kickoff. And I don't want to call out one of your competitors, but we look at the board, and there's certain books on the strip that I deem as sharp books that have more of the sharp players, betting there. And then there's books that are the recreational, that have more of the locals go there. And one of the places where all of the locals go, so you would normally expect locals are more square, the average recreational player, they gravitate to the favorites. When everybody had a solid 4 on Sunday on this game, the Patriots, and they were the only place in town that had 3.5, they moved it to the dog side. They were getting that much money. I knew I was dead right then.
Yeah, sometimes the screen will tell you the final score before it's even posted. I know what you mean, and I've been there myself.
You talked about the teasers, and you talked about how the Chargers being teased, and a lot of your teasers going down. Were they your most heavily bet teaser, or were people, or were there as much action on betting some of the favorites down?
Well, you would think the Rams and Saints combo teaser would be a popular one, and it was, not to the tune that people may think.
That's the one I played, by the way. I played the Rams. I played the Rams Saints teaser. So.
Yeah, great teaser. I mean, that probably was the easiest one to, at least, from a numbers aspect. Maybe, obviously the way the Eagles started didn't seem easy, but from a numbers aspect, it was a great numbers teaser there. But the Colts and Chargers were on so many of them. People just do the four-team teaser, and whatever combination you're talking, they were losing, especially with the Colts right away, gone, done, and that's where our big liability was.
Good stuff. Well, we talked about last week, Will. What's happening so far? Oh, and I wanted to ask you one question before we had from last week. The Kansas City game last week, how did the over-under fare for you with, once everybody saw, live shots from Kansas City and you saw the snow and at the beginning of the game, visibility and everything questionable, did you get a ton of under money in that last hour before the game?
Yeah, we got a decent amount of under money, and it's funny you mentioned I was at the Palms for a company event, and once they showed the screen, live looking at the field and the snow on the field, there was a group of people behind us, and they were talking about betting the under right away, so they ran to the window. I think, like the game was going to start. We had 20 minutes still, and they were betting. But that just gave me an indication of when I went to look at the screen the next day of what was actually occurring. There was a lot of under money, but there had been enough over money where we didn't take much of a loss overall in the total.
This week, I mean, how unique of a situation where New England is a rare dog, and then the Rams are a dog for the first time all season. I mean, do we have another weekend this week? Let's talk about the New England game first. I've seen mixes between 3 and 3.5. Do you think this line actually comes off 3 and comes down to 2.5?
I don't think so. The games of this magnitude, you really get great two-way action. There's nothing really lopsided. Bettors are making cases for all 4 teams here. But as far as, what our ticket count is showing now and money, KC is the more public dog as we speak. They're getting 54% of the tickets, and 78% of the money actually is on Kansas City. And we've taken a respected bet or two on the Chiefs as well. So we may actually need the Pats 2 weeks in a row. What was the last time we could say that? Which is, certainly not the normal occurrence. Did you ask me about the Rams game too, or that was for later?
Well, I want to jump in on the New England real quick.
Yeah.
Do you have any liability with New England as far as the futures go? Because coming into the season, as they are every year, New England is the team that gets the buzz. And then with the additions with the Rams in the offseason, they were getting a lot of buzz. We saw that money line go down on them for winning the Super Bowl. What's the best outcome of these 4 games for you as the house with futures?
Well, the Rams have got the most future money liability from the teams remaining. Dallas was pretty big, but they're out. So the Rams are biggest. The Patriots we took a lot early, but then people soured on them during the season. So we haven't had that much on New England. So Rams is certainly our number one.
Will, one quick question on that. What percentage of your futures are preseason compared to once we start getting into the season?
Well, I have to give you an estimate right now, but from what I've seen, before the season is about 75%, and then 25% come during the season.
Okay, that's higher than I thought for preseason. So, people aren't jumping on. I mean, probably teams like Kansas City are the ones that are your biggest liability once the season started, right? Jumping out to that start.
Oh yeah, definitely. Teams that jump out to that start with a great quarterback to boot, so people can envision them winning the Super Bowl. And the preseason bets are a lot from people, the tourists, people from out of town who couldn't, certainly can't bet it during the season as well. Taking that into account.
Well, with this line being at 3, when you guys were looking at putting the number up on this one, a lot of guys, including myself, and I talked to several guys that I respect, they had their power ratings in this game on Kansas City saying that it should be 4.5, 5. I even talked to one guy, thought it should be 6. And we're sitting at 3. How much is that because of Brady, Belichick, and the Patriots in general?
It's everything. I had the same thought process. I was thinking 4, in that range. Nothing huge, but it's working around a key number can certainly come into play. But definitely Brady and Belichick, they're going to get money really no matter what line we put up there, as long as it's something reasonable. So you err on the side of caution with them. You don't want to take anything for granted. And, with the Chiefs, it's Mahomes' first playoffs run here, so you don't want to get overly excited and put out a bad number either and put yourself in a heavy New England liability scenario.
We saw the total in that game because of the weather report early in the week. Money come in, obviously, on the under right away. Because of that, the recreational players don't play their money generally until the day of the game. So where do you see this total? Because we've had them do a reversal on the weather. Do you see this total going back up once the recreational players get involved? Because we know they like overs.
Yeah, I mean, recreational bettors are certainly getting wiser, and by the year or by the week. So it really comes down to what the wind is going to be like. If the wind is above 10 miles an hour, I actually could see the line dropping more. If there's no wind, then you know how that goes. It shouldn't affect things too much as far as how the ball travels. But right now it's already gone down 3.5 points. So we'll see what happens with the wind. I think that's going to really be a factor.
Well, moving to the NFC matchup, of course, another rematch. And when you guys are talking about lines like you are in the Rams-Saints, how much of the first game is put into the latter game? And tell us where the money is going on this NFC Championship.
Well, the first game, it was fairly evenly matched. I mean, the Rams made a tremendous comeback, nearly pulled it out. So, looking at that and how these teams match up currently, their rosters, I think the number's about right here. These teams certainly are somewhat even. They both have their strengths and weaknesses, but playing in New Orleans is such a huge advantage for the Saints. In fact, this line could probably be somewhere where Kansas City, where we were talking before, in a 4 range. It's possible it could get there. You never know. But as far as where the action right now, it's dead even as far as ticket count and money. But the money line dollars, which is lower volume as we speak, is 61% is on the Saints. So it's just a little indication of some Saint money to win the game outright. But the point spread, we're getting great two-way action.
Will, I was surprised on this one because obviously we don't have any weather conditions in the Dome to worry about. And the first meeting was a 45-35 score. So they put up 80 points. The first game closed at 57. Obviously way over the total, but we saw this one come out. We're sitting at basically the same over-under. What was the process there? Because you got to figure the public is going to be on the over again.
Yeah, and right now, as far as ticket count, believe it or not, it's 55% on the under, but I do anticipate that changing because the weather is not a factor, of course, so you don't have to ever take that into account here. Just the familiarity with the two teams certainly can make the game become a slower pace, bigger, more at stake. Familiarity, that's, it's kind of like a divisional game. When the second time around, teams kind of play a tighter game. as far as the total. But we have a better chance to see this total come back up before kickoff than we do the AFC title game. So I expect this to be more lopsided on the over money than the other game.
Our favorite saying is Joes versus pros.
Yeah.
This one here screams to me that the pros are going to be on the under, the Joes are going to be on the over.
Yeah, definitely. With these totals, and they probably are inflated a few points here. Let's be honest. These are, I'd have to look back, but these are some of the highest totals you'll see in conference championship game history. You know, again, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but with that being said, these games have a way of slowing down in the second half. Every possession becomes critical, and the way the Rams ran the ball last week, and the Saints have had a decent running game as well, that could chew up some clock and certainly change the dynamic.
You know, Will, it's a little cheating for me because I was on with Dave Cokin on the Las Vegas Sports Line, and we talked to Jason Symbol, and he said you guys may be in a very enviable position this weekend with both sides and both totals and just being able to relax on a Sunday. You probably haven't been able to say that for a long, long time.
No, not at all. Saying that and needing the Patriots 2 weeks in a row, those two things combined, that'd be the first time in history.
Yeah, we always say that the ultimate goal of a bookmaker is to have the same amount on both sides and just, you know, every day take that 10% to the bank. And it never really happens that way. You're always got exposure on one of the sides. But these are two evenly matched games, and, you know, you've got numbers that say that with the threes. And it's for smart players. You're not going to have as much exposure as far as the teasers go because, as you said last week, the plus EV teaser, no doubt, was to tease the Rams and the Saints. There is no really plus EV because in this week's numbers, because you're really not supposed to tease 3-point teams. You're never supposed to take a small favorite and make them a small dog. That's a no-no for people, but yet they do it. And really the math says you shouldn't tease the 3-point team up as well either. So I don't think you're going to have that exposure on the teasers, and if you do, I think you're going to have some people making some bad wagers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if any of the teaser money comes in this week, it would be used towards the total, you know, both games, depending on, you know, what the weather's like right before, you know, kickoff there in the first game.
And that's not a plus EV play either.
No.
Teasing
no,
totals,
high variance
especially
in the 50s,
yeah, especially when you're in the 50s for sure.
Yeah, exactly. But you know that's I've seen that before. What people do, and that's probably where we'll get the most teaser money. You know, in these games with totals like this, I had a thought in my head, guys. This reminds me of almost like the NBA. This has become now, the NFL's a game of runs. And when you have a game of runs, the most valuable thing a bettor can have, I think, is especially games like this, is in-game wagering. Because when you see a team go on a run, you know, score 3 straight times, usually that when teams are so, you know, such great teams that you have left, that's not going to continue. A team will eventually, you know, get themselves into the game, you know, and kind of stop that run and start scoring themselves. We've seen that with the Rams the first time when they played the Saints. They were getting blown out, and they came back, made it a game. So I think bettors definitely should take advantage of that, use in-game wagering, and treat it like an NBA game. You get a team at its lowest point when they you know, give up a big run, so to speak, with these high totals.
You know, and let's, you know, that's a great point, and let's remind people now, I mean, you don't have to be from Nevada to get the app. If you come in from out of town, you get the app, you make a deposit, and again, I know this from talking to Jason, if you make the deposit and you have to leave town and you can't cash out, you guys will even just settle with a check, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
Good stuff.
Absolutely, settle with a check, and we prefer you know, cash out right there, so we don't have to, you know, just go through the whole process. But if that's
I'm just talking worst case scenario. Yeah.
So. It's simple. The time it takes to open up the account, treat it as your opening bet, and the time it takes you to cash out is going to the window, standing in line
for one bet. That's cashing one bet.
One ticket. Yep. It's simple. And if especially for people that have never been to Vegas, when you come the first time, you know, it's, you know, we talk about me coming from a horse racing background, you know, you don't want to get shut out at the window. And I can tell you that on Sunday mornings, and when you got these 2 championship games, you got all day to do it. But I guarantee you, when you get right up to game time, there's going to be a line at the window, people making their last-minute bets.
Especially at halftime, too. There's a whole other line where you can't even get in.
Yeah, that's a whole different story. And whenever Super Bowl week comes, it's even more crazy with all the props and everything else. Get the app. It's absolutely the most convenient thing to do and simple to do. And Will, good luck.
Will, before we say goodbye, if we have people coming in from out of town, tell us the properties CGs are at.
Oh, well, definitely. If you're going to be on the Strip, you got the Tropicana, the Hard Rock, you have Venetian, Palazzo, and the Cosmopolitan. And any one of those properties, you can sign up for an account. Download the app first, sign up for an account, fund your account, and then make your bets. And you don't have to wait in line. Certainly with the 2 of the games that are going to be possibly the biggest handle we've ever had on conference championships. So you have to have the app for that. And those 5 properties are good. And you also have Silverton in the Palms for locals as well.
In the M, don't forget the original.
Oh, of course, the M, yes. Yeah, if you're coming in from California, driving in, you could stop at the M.
Say hi to Keith at the M, right?
Yeah, and really, if you're coming that direction, the M's the easiest to get in and out and to make it. My favorite on the Strip, they're all properties are gorgeous, but my 2 favorites, Cosmopolitan and the Venetian.
You just like eating at Legacy Stadium, right?
Actually, probably that's my least favorite place to eat at there. There's much better places to eat in the Venetian, but actually there's a great burger joint right. You could be sitting at the bar and looking into the sports book there at the Venetian, and you're right next to the poker room. A beautiful property at the Venetian. You guys did it right, and you did it even better at the Cosmo. The Cosmo, you're right off Las Vegas Boulevard. The only sports book in all of Las Vegas that is just a few steps from Las Vegas Boulevard. It's amazing. So check those out. And Will, thanks as always for joining us. Hopefully your schedule will be open. We'll be able to touch base with you next week, get some early stuff on the Super Bowl. And I know you're going to be busy next week getting all those props ready. And it's mind-boggling how you guys the process that has to go through, and maybe we'll save that for next week, asking you a little bit of all the work that has to go into coming up with those pages and pages of props that just continue to get to be a bigger list every year. It's an exciting time, and we'll be looking forward to that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys next week, and we'll get started on it right after the the Chiefs game, Chiefs and Pats, right away. They're not going to waste any time and get everything set up.
All right. Well, good luck this weekend, as I always say, except the games that I'm on. But
exactly. You guys, good luck as well.
You beat me last week.
Better week this week.
All right. Well, have a good one, buddy.
Thanks, Will.
All right, that's great stuff as always from Will. And, guys, that wraps up the first segment for tonight. We will be back with Handicappers Corner next. Ralph brought us a ton of stats for the NBA. That's up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. It's that time, Handicappers Corner. And our man Ralph is going to bring us some really interesting stats. And Ralph, well, you know what? The NFL season obviously winding down, and we'll have our angles and stuff in our breakdown of the 2 games. So we decided this week, let's start talking about basketball, and we're going to talk about the NBA. And I think, Ralph, honestly, and did a video this week with Teddy Covers about NBA handicapping, and I think more so than any other sport, situational handicapping in the NBA comes into play more than any other, just because things of travel. And let's face it, these guys, NBA players, they're making millions and millions of dollars. They just don't come to play every night. That's just, I'm sorry, I hate to say it. Until you get to the playoffs, you're handicapping 2 things when you handicap NBA. You're handicapping the stats, but then you're also handicapping situational. Who's going to show up?
Motivation,
who's going to be motivated?
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree.
Ralph, you've got some stuff. Tell us what you want to start with, and then we'll dig in deep here.
Well, the first thing when I was looking at the NBA is, if you notice this year, they started the season a few weeks earlier. You have fewer back-to-back games. You have more rest for the players. They wanted to get rid of those situations when LeBron was within Cleveland and you had these Saturday night huge games and he wasn't playing, and you had superstars taking off nationally televised games. And really, the season started more for that reason. They don't want those players taking off those big TV games. And let's face it, if you buy a ticket, excuse me, if you were watching the Cavs last year, you bought a ticket to watch LeBron play. How disappointed are you as an NBA fan to spend hundreds of dollars on maybe you're going to go to one game a year, you choose the LeBron game to go to, and then he sits out. So, I wanted to look at rest, and these numbers aren't huge, but a 6% difference is pretty significant. From 2014 to 2018 season, the last 4 years, the previous 4 years, teams playing with no rest were 1,005 and 967. So there were 2,000 games.
Now, is that straight up or against the spread?
Against the spread.
Okay.
They were 51% against the spread. So there was no advantage. A lot of teams played back-to-back days, and they were used to playing that. But this year, those teams playing back-to-back games, now 94 and 115, 45% against the spread. That may even get bigger and bigger if they continue this type of schedule. We'll keep track of that and see how it happens. And more importantly, we'll keep a note of that as the season progresses and we get later on in the year, how much that occurs. This year, with no rest, you've got a couple bad teams here. The Suns are 0-7 with no rest. The Mavs are 0-7 with no rest. The Knicks are 1-6 against the spread with no rest. And the Bulls are 1-6 against the spread with no rest. Does that make sense? Absolutely. You got young kids playing back-to-back games. You don't have go-to scores. You don't have the leadership. Horrible. Toronto with no rest, 7-1 against the spread. The Warriors.
Can I jump in there on the Toronto for a second? With no rest in their record against the spread, most of the time this year when they've played back-to-back games, Kawhi Leonard has not played in the second of the back-to-back. What's happened? They over-adjust the line when he's out of the lineup. And I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing on Toronto. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I have...
You may see the line adjustments in a lot of these. The Warriors are 6-1 against the spread with no rest, and the Nuggets are 6-1 against the spread with no rest. So those are the tops and bottoms. Does it make sense? Well, we'll see, and we'll continue to update those numbers. A couple other things I just wanted to bring up that... when you're talking football, when we talk football, teams off an embarrassing loss tend to bounce back. Well, you talked about the NBA. You talked about a bunch of millionaire players. You talked about situations. Since 2015, so the last 3 seasons, teams off a straight-up loss as a double-digit favorite, 37 and 45, 45%.
Wow.
So do not assume that these prima donnas off a loss as a double-digit favorite. So what? It doesn't matter to them. They go out and play the next game. The line may be adjusted because of it. 45%. Also, when a team is off a straight-up loss as a double-digit favorite, the total is 51 and 36, 59% under. So you think, are they going to play lockdown defense the next game because they were embarrassed? Well, it hasn't happened. So, again, just a couple numbers for you to think about. Of course, I always do the flip side. What happens when a team is off a straight-up win as a double-digit dog? Obviously, we know what happens to the team that lost. Well, the team that won has been 45, 39, and 3 against the spread, 53.6%. And they've gone 46 and 40, 53.5% to the over. So, again, no rest. We know what happens. We know that bad teams off no rest have been very bad this year. And don't overemphasize a team that's off an embarrassing home loss as a double-digit favorite because they have not responded.
Okay, those are league-wide numbers. We love league-wide situations. But let's drill down a little bit further. And you've got some stuff where you've actually got teams that have excelled in certain situations. Let's start with teams off a straight-up loss as a favorite. Are there any teams that are bad or good in that situation? Tell me some good teams.
Let me tell the good, and you could do the bad, Marco. In that system I gave you that we talked earlier, those were teams that lost as a double-digit favorite. These team specifics are just teams that lost straight up as a favorite. So you could have been a 1 or a 2 or a double-digit favorite. Some of the best teams, I was surprised to get a few of these. There are teams that aren't a favorite very often, but the Phoenix Suns, the Nets, and the Kings have each only been a favorite one time where they lost, and they covered those next games. So you might think maybe those mean something to those teams. A couple other teams that have done well. The Pistons are 3-0 against the spread. The Greek Freak and the Milwaukee Bucks are 8-2 off a straight-up loss as a favorite. The Timberwolves are 7-3 off a loss as a favorite. Does that fit your category, Marco? Were they favored in that last game they were embarrassed by?
They were
a dog. Okay.
They were a dog.
So, you have those situations. And, just to mention a couple of the premier teams, the Rockets this year are 7-7 after losing as a straight-up favorite. And let me find the Warriors. The Warriors are actually 4-6 off a favorite. But tell us some of the bottom teams that have not done well after losing.
Some of the teams, let's start with the Orlando Magic. It's only happened 5 times this year that they're coming off a straight-up loss as a favorite, because this is a team that
not a favorite often.
Not a favorite often, and they're 1-4 in their next game. New York Knicks, same story. A team that's not favored very often, 1-4 if they're coming off a loss. And the last one I'll give you, the Grizzlies, 1-6. Memphis, when they're coming off a straight-up loss as a favorite. Again, these are teams. Memphis is a team that just can't score.
Yeah,
so they're the best team of that bunch that we just mentioned. But yes, they are a team that struggles to score. So makes sense with those ones not being good angles. But like you said, we always like to flip the script. So how about off a straight-up win as a dog? Who's the good teams in that situation?
Well, the top team is clearly the Denver Nuggets. They are 7-0 off a straight-up win as a dog. So they're a team that gains confidence at what they're doing. They pull the upset. The next game, again, they're 7-0. The Celtics, they aren't a dog very often. But when they have been a dog and they pulled the upset, they're 2-0 the next game. A couple other teams, the Trailblazers are 5-1. And the Heat and the Nets are 7-2. So you have a team like, the Nets, who, when they do win as a dog, 10 times this year they've won outright as a dog, and they've gone 8-2 against the spread. Let's pull out the primo teams. The Rockets, 1-1. Again, not a dog very often. And I'm going to say, are the Warriors even on here? Nope, the Warriors haven't won as a dog, right? Because they've been a dog. Have they been a dog this year?
I'm not sure they have been a dog this year.
Yeah, maybe if they were at Houston once, but they would have won that game anyway, so they're not even on this list. Marco, tell us about the teams that have done poorly after pulling the outright upset.
All right, well, the first one, and it makes sense that this team would have a letdown after an underdog win, because they don't have very many wins to begin with, and that's your Cleveland Cavaliers. This is a team, they've only had 7 outright wins as an underdog this year. They're 2-5 the game following that. So
yeah, they don't have the talent to put back-to-back good games together. You may get an outlier game where they do well and they play well, and then the next game they come back to the return to some of the norm.
Now, the next one, this one surprises me a little bit. You've got the Pelicans, New Orleans. They've had 4 outright underdog wins this year. They're only 1-3 in the next game. This is a team. The Pelicans are in that middle of the pack of the NBA. For them, unfortunately, they're in the West, and there's just so many good teams in the West with what they've got with Anthony Davis down there. This is a spot where it surprises me that they haven't had more underdog wins, and it surprises me that they're bad in this role.
Well, this and the next team, perhaps this. You have teams that aren't the best in the league but are trying to get there. And when they are a dog, they're playing the primo teams, so they get up for that big game. they win the dog, and then they have a letdown the next situation.
Oh, that's perfect setup for the Sixers because they have been up and down all year. They have been the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde of the NBA. When they're good, Ralph, they're very good. When everybody's on the floor, Embiid, now they got Jimmy Butler and everything. This team can make a lot of noise, but they're so young. And, I watch them on nights, and it's like they didn't even come to play. You look at them, and you just don't see the effort. You don't see the hustle. And doesn't surprise me, 1-4 off of that satisfying underdog win the next game out.
And, Marco, one more thing let's look at. And, I did this because I remember back in football, I used to like playing against teams that would face the game after facing a physical Ravens team. Another team, when Seattle had the Legion of Boom for those previous few years, the game after you played Seattle was a very difficult game that more people lost than you won because you got beat up in that game that you played.
Pittsburgh and Baltimore was the same in the NFL. I always would go against whoever played the Steelers the week before because, as you said, you got pounded by them because of the physical defense and because the Steelers were always one of the premier teams in the NFL, so teams would get up for them, and it's a natural letdown the week after.
And, so I ran all the teams in the NBA and what the record is the game after playing these teams. Well, I'm going to go through the worst couple. The first one surprises the absolute heck out of me. I don't really have an answer, but to tell you how much of a difference this is, of all the teams that I ran, the worst team or the team that you do the poorest at was 24%. The best was 63%. But only two teams were under 42% on the bad side. That team I'm talking about, the Detroit Pistons.
Yep. The
game after playing the Pistons, teams are an amazing 10-31-1 against the spread, 24.4%. The second team we can easily explain.
Let's stop for a second and go back to Detroit. When you gave me this list, and I saw the team on the top and the team on the bottom, made absolutely no sense in thinking-wise. The only thing I could say, and I'm sorry, Detroit, and I'm going to get hate mail from everybody in Detroit.
Including Johnny?
Yeah. Is the water that bad in Detroit? Is it such a shithole of a place to go to that you just feel depressed for the next game? Because this makes absolutely no sense at all.
Perhaps they're playing well against Detroit or it's, again, it's just one of those numbers that, we'll look at and I'll mark down and we'll look again in a few weeks to see if it's continued. And, if it has, perhaps there's something about playing that Pistons team that we'll look at further. The other team that's under 42%, again, no surprise, the Golden State Warriors. Teams give their best when they play the Warriors. When they're at home, it's a sold-out crowd. People, like we talked about, when they want to see LeBron, if you're going to buy one game and the Warriors are in town, that's the team you want to buy. Well, after playing the Warriors, it doesn't matter if you win or lose. You're 15-28 against the spread, 34.9% that next game.
Yeah, it makes that one makes all the sense in the world. Now going to the flip side, teams that you play and then you have a good record against the next game. The Orlando Magic. Now this one, this one's a little bit of a head scratcher. Why do you play so well after playing Orlando? But teams this year are 26-16 against the spread. In that situation, that's 61.9%.
Now, maybe one thing I could think of is a lot of times when teams travel, they play the Florida teams or the Texas teams encircled. So, but again, you'd probably be playing Miami or you played Miami the game before, and then you're going elsewhere. So, that may not be the best answer because Miami's played pretty well this year. Mm-hmm. It's not as if, though, they're a negative. And again, another surprising team coming up.
The Bulls, teams play well. I guess maybe this one I could say because the Bulls are so bad.
You have an easier game.
You have an easy game. You can get your starters out most of the time in the fourth quarter and, give them, considerable minutes on the bench and they're fresh for their next game. That one, that's the only thing I can make sense out of that one. But that one's 27-16. That's 62.8%. The last one makes no sense to me. And because this is one of the premier teams in the East. So if you're playing this team, you're going to be up for them. And you would expect after playing an up game, your next game would be a flat spot. But it's not. The Boston Celtics, teams coming off the Celtics in their next game, 26-15. That's 63.4% against the spread. And that's a nice sample size. It's not like we're doing a 10-game, trial here. This is,
we're
through
40
the
games
season.
in. Yeah, we're halfway through the season. And lastly, just because we did the sides, now let's look at the totals. And again, I'm going to mention these teams. It's sort of a wide variety. I mean, the Clippers don't play defense. The Heat play decent defense. But this is how teams do over-under after facing these teams. I'm going to look at the teams that have the most unders. After playing the Sacramento Kings, teams are 15-28 over-under. That's 34.9% to the over. The Clippers, teams are 15-27 over-under. That's 36%. And the Heat, teams are 15-22-5. 5 pushes, so you have a lot of variance in that one, and that's 40.5% to the over.
All right, here's what I'll say with the Kings and the Clippers. Wouldn't apply to the Heat. The Kings and Clippers are two of your faster-paced teams in the NBA. So you're coming off a game where you went up and down the floor. Now, because of that, you got two factors come in. If that was a high-scoring game, your next game, the total's going to be adjusted some, and they're going to put the total up higher based off your last game's score. So you're probably getting a few points of value on the under to start with. In any other sport, I always say tired teams don't play defense because it takes more energy to play defense. That may be true, but when you're talking about high totals, you need both teams to be able to score to get to the overs. If one team scores, 120 and the other team, has a bad game and scores 95, you're not getting there. You need both teams to score. When you don't have your legs, you don't have your jump shot.
Yep.
Okay? So that would make sense to me in dissecting the top two, the Kings and the Clippers, which surprises me that you don't have the Warriors higher on this scenario because you're going to play a high tempo game against them as well.
Yeah, and the Miami game, again, you have 5 pushes in here. So that means you are 5 points away from being 20-22.
Yeah.
So, again, we talked about the pushes. There was only 1 push in each of the first 2. When you have 5 pushes, some people may have a better or worse record depending on what lines you use. The NBA lines can vary. So, the Miami Heat's one of those ones that could just be more of a anomaly in there because of that.
Now, go to the flip side of that, and where is the better over teams after playing somebody? Little surprising here. After playing the Spurs, you've got a 27-16-1 to the over. That's 62%.
Well, Pop's got the Spurs playing defense again now.
They're playing well, and they're a team that passes the ball well, so maybe on the defensive end, you're not going up and down the floor, so you do have your legs for the next game. And after playing a good defensive team, then you play somebody else. Shots come a little easier for
absolutely.
you and stuff. And if you did have an under the night before, just like we would say with the over, if they're going to adjust it, they adjust it a little bit down to bringing that total down. And the last one would be the Wizards. And following playing a Washington game, teams are 29-14-1 to the over. That's 67.4%.
That's the highest mark of any side or any total. That's 67% on the Wizards.
Yeah, you got something that's hitting at 67%. That's good stuff.
That'll do it. It's anyone that has an idea, we've got a couple podcasts coming up. If there's specific things you want to say, again, follow me at Twitter at CalSportsLV. Or, shoot me an email, Ralph at WagerTalk. And if it's something we can talk about and break down and be able to do on the pod, happy to do for you guys.
Yeah, we'll be doing more of these statistical things here on Handicappers Corner. We'll also be, now that we're into basketball, I want to, promote our videos this week. We did a lot of how-to handicapping tips, NBA, college basketball, conference play. They're all different handicaps, Ralph, and all of us, we all have a different way that we handicap. Yeah, we all look at numbers, but we look at different things as far as the intangible things. And, I hate this phrase, but everybody uses it. There's more than one way to skin a cat. And I just want to find a person that's skinning cats because I want to punch them in the face. But it's a saying everybody uses. Whatever you use, how you get to your games, it doesn't matter as long
you
as
don't go to Chinese restaurants.
That's an old saying, and I'll be honest with you. I came, from back in Pittsburgh, but I was actually in a smaller town, and it was funny. A bunch of us guys used to get together at lunchtime. The businessmen, successful businessmen in the town where I grew up in, and we'd all meet for lunch every day. And the one guy, he's always funny as hell, and he lived right in the downtown, and we got a new Chinese restaurant, and somebody asked him, he goes, hey, have you tried, I forget the name of what it was, Lotus Garden or something, it was one of those Chinese names. He goes, no, I haven't been there yet, but he goes, God damn, I haven't seen a stray cat in weeks. And that was right after the Chinese restaurant opened up. But now we're going to get hate mail from that community. And anybody else you want to piss off before I close the Handicappers Corner?
I'm good, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for the setup on that one. I'll get the hate mail. All right, guys, that's going to conclude Handicappers Corner. When we come back, we're going to talk some college basketball up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. We're going to head into college basketball. Going to check out a couple games here for Friday and Saturday night. Get things started. The Big Ten playing those Friday night games. Got a couple good ones. We got Maryland guys heading into Ohio State. Ohio State, Ralph, they started the season off 12-1. Then they played Michigan State, lost that one, and then lost two more after that. Now on that three-game slide, sitting at 12-4. They host Maryland coming to town. Maryland's been hot. How do you see this one on Friday night?
Well, I look at it, and I think it's almost to the must-win situation for Ohio if they want to take that next step. Maryland, like you said, 15-3. The concern for me with Maryland is you've only played three road games. You beat Navy, and then last week in the Big Ten, you beat Rutgers and Minnesota. I think Ohio State, off that loss to Michigan State, and then off away losses to Rutgers and Iowa, they still haven't taken that step of being able to win on the road. I think back at home, I think Holtman has this team ready, and Ohio State does beat Maryland and cover the spread.
Situationally, it favors Ohio State. Maryland's coming off a good series of wins. The Minnesota win on the road, very nice win against Wisconsin, misleading score in that game because Maryland really dominated the game. It got close at the end, but they were up a ton in that game. This might be tough for them going on the road, feeling good about themselves against an Ohio State team that really needs the win.
Yeah, and, they're 6-1 in the conference, but as Ralph said, they've managed to dodge the big guns of the Big Ten so far. So it's kind of, a little bit of a, I don't want to say counterfeit, but it's, we'll see with these next couple games coming up, because after Ohio State, they got Michigan State. We'll find out for sure what this team is made out of. I look at it in their two road wins, Minnesota and Rutgers. Minnesota's been all over the place. They've played very good at times this year, and then they throw in an absolute clunker out of nowhere.
That unbelievably lopsided loss at Illinois on Wednesday night.
Absolutely. And then beating Rutgers, not a big fan of that win either. So I agree with you guys. Situational-wise, I think this is a spot for Ohio State. That's the only way I could look for this one on Friday night. Moving to Saturday, let's just go to the marquee game, and it's Virginia at Duke, guys. Now, we talked about this one at Wager Talk. We did a video on this one in Virginia. What can you say about this team? You know I'm high on them.
The best regular season team in the country.
They are.
I can't say anything beyond that because they're going to have to prove it in the tournament.
Well, I think it's going to happen this year. I think they're going to have a very deep run. I think they're on a mission. And to lose a game, I said it over and over, Dave. You lose a game the way they lost last year to who they lost with what they had set up in front of them for a deep run last year. All summer long, to be thinking about that one, you got to be kicking yourself to let one like that get away from you.
They made history.
The wrong kind.
1 versus 16, and they're the one who lost. If that's not going to motivate you for the next year, then I don't know what is. The other thing here is that Duke is still. Now they got some good news on the kid. Who is it? Is it Davis? Jones. I'm bad on names. I think everybody knows that. It looked like he might be out for, who knows, maybe the season. They got some good news today. He's not going to be out that long.
Good.
So that's a big plus for Duke. But they are going in a little bit short-handed here. And I think Duke's going to gear up for certain games. And I guess this will be one of them. But I do think Duke's, right now, they're pointing more toward later. Mm-hmm. ACC tournament and NCAA tournament. I think the regular season, you got an advantage here with Virginia.
Ralph, we know when you look at Virginia, we know about that defense. That defense has been there for the last several years. But what's new about this team this year is they can score, and they have great offensive efficiency. This is a team that's knocking down 39.8% of their three-point shots. That's 10th best in the country. They move the basketball, passing it better than anybody I've seen this year. They're hard out, but this situational-wise, I just don't think this is a great spot for them. It's hard to say, hey, a game that you just played was bigger than a game against Duke. I'm not going to try to, sell that. But the fact is, Virginia Tech is the only team that had beaten them in each of the last 3 years. Of all the teams, Virginia Tech was the only team. And they went out, Tuesday night, and they just took them behind the woodshed, and they laid it to them. That was a very satisfying win. And I think because of that, we're going to get some line value. Couple that with the injuries to Duke, I think we're going to get a spot where the line's going to be cheap. I got to look to the Duke side for me.
I think Duke can very well be a home dog in this situation. By the way, since 2012, they've only been a home dog one time. That was against North Carolina in 2016. They were plus 2.5. They lost by 4. Marco, you want to talk situations, and Dave talked about the regular season, but home losses are rare, Dave and Cameron. Duke is 148-10 at home since 2005. One of the home losses came in their last game against Syracuse. One of the home losses was their only home loss last year against Virginia. So I think they do focus on this game to rebound from that home loss last year. And not want to lose twice at home to Cameron.
Off the Syracuse, that was a bad game.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, you lose the best point guard in the country. Yeah. A lot of teams are going to struggle in the second half, and that's exactly what they did. Trey Jones, by the way, number 2 in the country with a 5.9 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. So, no one's been better than that. But Cam Reddish also missed the Syracuse game. He can handle the point. I think they probably got R.J. Barrett as the point. He was the second half in that game. So because of that, because it's a win situation, because Virginia has some big numbers, though, they haven't played a defense like Duke, and they haven't played on the road. I would have to back Duke in a pick-em type game.
Moving to another big game on Saturday, Big Ten action. We've got Michigan traveling to play Wisconsin. And now, obviously, this Michigan team, they haven't lost yet, playing great basketball, but I don't know how good this team is yet. They're ranked high, obviously, but they're going to be going into a Wisconsin team that started the season out 10-2, and then now the wheels have kind of fallen off. They're sitting at 11-6. This is, I know you like to use this phrase, this is a resume builder for Wisconsin if they want to get their postseason resume in order.
We talked about this on the video we did. I think I did it with it was with Tony Finn.
Okay,
this game. And the problem with Wisconsin right now is that they're just too reliant on Ethan Happ at this point. He's having to do everything. And I realize Ethan Happ's a terrific player. He's going to be on the final ballot for National Player of the Year. He won't. I don't think he's going to win it, but he's going to be in that mix. He'll be in the mix for Big Ten Player of the Year, along with the kid at Purdue, probably Cameron Edwards, who I think might win it, but that remains to be seen. But the problem is that Wisconsin is doing an awful lot of standing around right now and waiting for Happ to do something, and it's still a team game. And unless they can get away from that concept here, they're going to be in trouble because Beeline is one of the best X's and O's guys around, and you can be sure he's going to design a defense that's going to make it difficult for Happ to get the ball easily in the inside and then wreak havoc from there. I think right now you've got a coaching mismatch here with Beeline on the plus side of it, and to me, I don't think I'll play it because Wisconsin kind of needs this win at this point, and situationally it probably does favor them, but I don't think I want to go against the Wolverines here, Ralph.
Besides West Virginia pops out as the most disappointing team in the country, no question. But Wisconsin losing 4 of their last 5 games shocked me. I had them much higher in my power ratings. I've dropped them considerably, but, Greg Gard, their head coach, feels comfortable with the team. At least that's what he said in his press conferences, and he's talked about it.
Maybe you ought to feel a little less comfortable and let him have it a little bit.
Yeah, perhaps. There's coaches that like to coddle their players, and there's coaches that rip their players.
All I know is that if you look at the final score at Maryland, well, it's not bad. Close to the number. They got killed in the game. Okay, it was a late rally that got him back in the game.
Yeah, the home loss to Minnesota to me 3 or 4 games ago was horrendous.
Yep.
Losing to Purdue in overtime, I can deal with that. But, now you have back-to-back home losses, and you have Michigan coming in. The big number, though, the big disparity in numbers in this is Michigan maybe 17-0, but they've played the number 97 schedule in the country. That's one of the worst for a power conferences to play that weak of a schedule. Now your only Big Ten road game was at Illinois, which is nothing like going into Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin is in desperation mode. I think, them playing an undefeated Michigan team gives them an edge. And I will, at least I don't know if there'll be a play, but at least for the podcast, I'll back Wisconsin one more game, and we'll see what happens. If they lose again, then, I'll have to obviously turn my thoughts on them.
Yeah, I'm going to give them the shot here as well, guys. And what I'm looking at is if there's 6 losses, though, 4 of the 6 losses were either on the road or at a neutral site, okay? This is still a tough place to go into. We know what conference basketball is about. It's tough to go through a slate. You're not, very few teams go undefeated in conference schedule. There's all those bumps in the road, and this is one of them. This Wisconsin team was playing good basketball at the beginning of the season. They didn't embarrass themselves when they played Virginia early. They only lost by 7. This is a team that I think can hang around, and I'm not sold on Michigan yet, so I agree. I am on Wisconsin in this one.
One thing to be cautious of, Michigan backers, Michigan starters have played the 2nd most minutes in the country. If you go on the road to Wisconsin and you get a couple guys in foul trouble, you are in trouble because their bench hasn't played. They use a very short rotation. So, again, now you're going to a place that's going to be a physical game. You may get some fouls. If that happens to Michigan, they go down.
Good point, Ralph. Thanks for putting that in there. And that's going to wrap up our college basketball preview. We're going to step out for a quick break. When we come back, it's what you've been waiting for. You want to break down these 2 AFC NFC Championship games? We're going to go deep inside these 2 games. That's up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast. Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. This segment is brought to you by uwager.eu. Get a 50% sign-up bonus when you enter coupon code WT50. That's WT50. 50% sign-up bonus at uwager.eu. That is an exclusive offer to our Wager Talk listeners. All right, guys, it's Championship Sunday. AFC, NFC, we're going to start it off with the first game. It kicks off first. We've got the Rams going to the Superdome to play the Saints. Guys, this is another one of those ones where it is a second meeting. These 2 teams played earlier in the season. Watching that game was like watching 3 different games. First 2 scores apiece, 14-14. Looked like we were going to have a slugfest between the two. Then the Saints run out to a 21-point lead, come out in the third quarter. The Rams make that big run, get back in the game, tie it, and then you get the Saints pull away in the fourth. Off of last week's games, Saints, the least impressive of the 4 winners last week. Were they lucky to get by to that? Does that carry over this week, or was it a wake-up call? I'll start with you, Ralph. How do you see this one?
Well, they were off the bye. Philadelphia obviously taking the momentum they had. The Foles magic continued getting out to the early lead. But, I just think that shows the maturity of the Saints team and what they've done. They didn't panic. The defense, not many people talk about the defense, but, sans that Carolina game, they only allowed 14.5 points per game their last 8. You look at the playoff situation, New Orleans 6-0 at home. That's a well-known number. Breeze 14-2 ratio in those 6 playoff games. The reason I'm leaning with New Orleans in this game is Jared Goff and what he's done at home compared to on the road. At home, a 22-3 ratio. On the road, a 10-9 ratio. And you have to remember, even last week when he was at home and the crowd was maybe 50-50, he struggled sometimes getting those calls from McVay. Remember, when you're the quarterback, your audio system turns off with 15 seconds left on the clock, and he wasn't getting the plays in quick enough. He was struggling to get the hand signals. Imagine that with the dome noise. And everyone loves Jared Goff and McVay. I'll tell you what, McVay is still 1-1 in the playoffs, has yet to coach a playoff road game. Goff 1-1 in the playoffs, has yet to play a playoff game on the road. I'm going to back Drew Brees.
Dave, I'm going to go to you. And last week, as he said, the Saints come out sluggish. They fall behind 14-0. When are these coaches going? Because we saw the same thing last year with the Rams. You rest your players in Week 17, and if you're good enough to rest your players in Week 17, that means you're going to have a first-round bye because your team's that good. You don't need the game in Week 17. We saw the Rams lose last year, and we saw the Saints almost lose this year. Are coaches going to wake up and stop resting all these guys in Week 17?
No, because it's still, the flip side of it is if you get one of these guys hurt in a meaningless football game, then you're a complete idiot. Okay, so, and the players can use the time off. And now, I just think Brees misfired on a pass he should have connected on early in the game, and it set the tone for the early portion of the game. And then the Saints just completely took the game over. In the second half, they completely dominated the Eagles in that game. So, they won. And they should have won more comfortably than they did. So I'm not attributing that to being dull or anything like that. I just think Brees made a couple of bad throws early on, and the Eagles got hot early. But then they took over later in the game. I think the most interesting thing to me going into this game is that I suspect it's going to be played in a different style than the first time around. That was a shootout. They were just up and down the field all day long. The only time they weren't was when New Orleans got a little conservative coming out of the second half kickoff and actually let the Rams back in the football game. But I think you got two teams playing a slightly different style now. The Rams, Cooper Kupp's gone, and it changed the offense. And they did pick up Anderson, who has proven to be a tremendous support system for Gurley. Gurley doesn't have to do it all on his own right now, and they've got a powerhouse running game, which allows them to maybe not put as much trust as they need to, or as they would prefer not to, is the right wording, with Goff, who's never been in a game this big before. So I think you're going to see some ball control on the part of the Rams. The Saints are actually more of a ball control team now anyway, and you saw coming out of halftime last week with that great drive that they put together that took forever. They're going to run the ball. They're not playing no huddle to any extent right now. They're going a little old school, old-fashioned smash-mouth football. So to me, even though when they played the first time, you thought, boy, if these teams rematch, who knows what they're going to do with the total. You've got a lower total here, and I think it makes sense. I think this game is going to be played in a style that lends itself more to, I'm not going to say a defensive struggle by any means, but a game where ball control matters, lengthy drives, some of which end in field goals, and I am looking at the game as a potential under.
When have we ever had a championship game with 4 running backs?
Yeah.
Like we do.
Yep.
I mean, that's pretty amazing in itself. I mean, you talk quarterbacks and offenses, but, Anderson with his fresh legs shown he's a beast. And Ingram's does what he does, and Kamara does what he does. So, I mean, the 4 running backs has got to be the best combo of running backs we've seen in a long time in this type of game.
They may not be, running backs might not be in vogue to be first-round draft choices right now unless you get a freak like Barkley. But it's still how you win and lose football games. If you can control the trenches and control the ground game, you're probably going to win.
It's funny that, you always have offense. That's the new NFL. But when you get to the playoffs, isn't it funny what you see? You go back to old school. Here's what my take from the Rams game last week. They caught Dallas by surprise with that game plan, in my opinion, because if you looked at it on paper, you're not supposed to be able to run the football the way they did against the Cowboys.
They killed them on the line of scrimmage.
They
killed
did.
them.
And nobody expected C.J. Anderson to have the game that he had, let alone have the number of carries that he had. That tells me, and this is my interpretation, Gurley's not 100%. They are trying to get him to the finish line and get everything they can get out of him without, having him break down. Anderson had more carries, and more importantly, when have you ever seen Gurley only have 2 targets out of the backfield?
Anderson looked like the better back to me. If
he's playing really well.
Yeah, I mean, again, when you have fresh legs and you haven't played all season like he has,
it's not like he's an untalented guy.
So maybe they're just playing the better back too.
I don't think he's the better. Well, I'm not going to say that, but
well, for a full season, you want Gurley over Anderson, but in this instance, right now,
well, plus the other team is keying on Gurley more.
Right.
So,
and you hit the nail on the head. The other part is, I think that game plan was to protect Jared Goff, because we've seen Goff a few times in the big games this year. Chicago game, that's the one I go to. He looked like the Goff that we saw under Jeff Fisher. He looked lost in that game.
Look, let's call it straight. We knew that Cooper Kupp was going to be an impact loss, but maybe not to the extent that he's been. He's Brady's Edelman. Mm-hmm. He really is. Or he's Goff's Edelman is what I meant to say. The guy, you really got to have that guy out there. Gronk gets
the security blanket.
Gronk gets most of the attention in New England, but Edelman's always been the key guy for the last several years, the security blanket. Right. And it turned out that Kupp was that for Goff. He's not the same quarterback without him.
And to me, the game last week changed on two items. They weren't plays. One was a play. The other one was, you touched on it, the 18-play drive. When I watched that 18-play drive, and as many times as they got pushed back and still overcame.
With the penalties,
overcame all of those and ended it with a touchdown, not a field goal.
I believe they set a record, unofficial, but I think it was a record. It was a 164-yard touchdown drive with the penalties.
Really?
Which has never happened.
Holy they kept going. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
I was watching the game, but putting those numbers in perspective is amazing.
I believe that's the longest. They said it was the longest touchdown drive of all time in the NFL. Never been done before. 164 yards with the penalties.
When they finished that drive, I said to myself right then, I said, that was a championship drive.
Yeah.
And the other play was, and I know they gave Peterson a lot of flack for declining the penalty and leaving them with 4th and 1. I'm sorry, 4th and 1 at the other team's 30. I'm declining. Me personally, I'm declining the penalty too. I know the analytics say, it's a good percentage. You're going to make 4th and 1, but I'm sorry, you're down 14-0, and you're at your own 30-yard line. If they go for that and miss it,
game's over.
Game's over. So in my mind,
it was a daring move by Peyton, because he would have been second guessed if they don't make it.
Right.
I agreed with it. I agreed with him going for it, but I'm at that point in the field. I'm also. It's not going to be. It's not
they were in field goal range if they don't make the play. Philadelphia.
Yeah.
You're saying we're willing to go down 17-0 if we don't make this. That was the momentum changer. The drive took the air out of the room, but they still had to get an interception at the end of the game to preserve the win.
That's because Lutz missed the field goal. After another Saints penalty. Yeah. I mean, they had 1,000 penalties.
The Saints had how many times that they could have put it in. They settled for those field goals those
listen,
couple times.
I know it sounds stupid to say, but you almost kind of got a bad beat in the Saints.
Yeah,
they completely took that game over in the second half.
Right, the most from the second quarter on, they dominated the game. Yeah, I like the Saints here. I'm going to make it unanimous. Looking with the Saints, I think the Rams go out here, and I got to agree with you. When I saw the over/under, and after that first game, John Q. Public, they're going to look at what the score was in that first game. They're not going to look and do the things that you pointed out where what's different about these two teams now than when they played that game.
Odds makers are kind of tipping you off a little bit.
With setting the number up.
It's not like the weather's not going to be an issue here. And the total's pretty low based on what they did the first time around.
And the odds makers know that the public's going to bet the over.
They're going to bet this game over.
And they still brought this out at a number that was lower than you expected it to be. So that's a big telltale. All right, guys, let's go to the next one. And, it's the Patriots, so we're going to start with you, Dave. Same old. Here they are, Patriots in the AFC Championship game.
I'm going to talk about the total.
Okay.
I'll leave the side to you guys if you want to talk about it. And here's one where there was some movement on the under when the weather forecast came up, but now it looks like the weather's not going to be quite as bad as they said it was, and the over money is going to start to show. And I think the over money is the right way to go in this game. I know the Saints' defense, the Chiefs' defense has been better at home than on the road, considerably better. But it's still an offensive football team, okay? And I know they played a really good defensive game against the Colts last week, but that's the Colts, and this is the Patriots. Patriots are going to get their points. The Patriots' defense on the road has been awful, okay? They're nothing short of awful. And they're going up against an offense that is a monster at home. I don't know what they're going to do to prevent Kelsey from having a huge day. Maybe Belichick can come up with something. He's as good as it gets. But I think this is going to be similar to the first game. Whereas I don't think the Rams-Saints game is going to be all that similar to the first meeting. I think this is going to be similar to the first meeting where they went up and down the field and nobody could stop anything. And I think this total is too low, and I believe it is going to go over the total. I think the public will bet the over when push comes to shove this weekend, and I think they've got a winner.
Well, and Dave, and you talk about that first one going over. If you remember the way that game set up, Patrick Mahomes, most of the sharps, us guys that week, we were on New England. That was the game because we're saying, all right, here's where Mahomes has to prove that he can do it. This was going to be his biggest stage. But if you remember, he didn't have a good first quarter.
Well, after that he did.
But after that he played. So they still put up 40 points in the game with him doing nothing in the first quarter.
They scored too soon. They scored too quickly.
That's the only mistake he made in the second half.
They hit a 70-something yard touchdown at the end of the game. If they had a long drive there, they'd have won the football game.
Absolutely. Ralph, looking at this game, we all talked about it. And first of all, for the AFC Championship, these were the two most dominating teams last week, Kansas City and New England. And the New England 13-point win, that is the most dominating 13-point win ever. It was a 30-point game, the domination of that game. Somehow it landed at 13. But hindsight's always 20/20. We all mentioned it last week going into the game. We pointed out that the Chargers were third straight road game. Chargers, that was their fourth road game in 5 weeks. Chargers, West Coast to East Coast to West Coast, back to East Coast.
Yeah, you left out the most important one. The Chargers are still the Chargers. They are. They don't win big games.
You did say the Chargers will find a way to lose.
I said that.
You said it on the air. So, you were on.
With all of those negative factors, and then throw in a warm weather team in a cold city, most of the handicapping community, the Sharps, wanted the Chargers in that game. I'll admit I was on the Chargers in that game, wrong side. I chose to ignore all that. When that game started, 3 minutes into that game, they looked like a team that, was in all of those situations.
Even when they tied 7-7.
Yeah, it was a broken coverage.
You already knew at that point this is like this team's in trouble.
Now, and you go to Kansas City, same deal. You had a dome team playing in a blizzard, At the beginning, it was blizzard conditions, cold. You had a team that was playing their third straight road game. Yet, a lot of people chose to go with the Colts because they were the hot team coming in, and we all talked about that defense of the Chiefs. They play different at home. You want to talk about the home-road dichotomy of New England? How about
I am.
how is Kansas City? Ralph, tell us about it.
Well, again, home road on both sides, Marco. KC at home allowing 17.4 points per game, on the road 34.6. So you have a 17.2 difference. You almost double your points. New England at home plus 117 yards per game this year, on the road minus 43. 160 yards per game difference from at home on the road. You look at New England, 3-5 straight up in ATS away. And 3 of those games, they only scored 10 points. 1, they scored 20 in 4 of those losses. And then so much is made about Brady and Belichick in the playoffs. Well, 9 of 10 of those games, that's just a number off the top of my head, are at home. They blow through the AFC East. They have the home field edge. They're the number 1 seed. They don't have to travel. Brady at home in the playoffs, 46-18 ratio. Brady on the road in the playoffs, a very human-like 8-8 ratio. And now one system just to add to that, teams that play 3 straight games at home and then travel for the playoffs, like New England. They were home the last 2 regular season games. They were home the first game of the playoffs. And now they're on the road, 2-14 straight up and against the spread. So, again, there's a reason conference champions have won 10 straight. There's a reason conference champions at home conference games, the home team is 10-0 straight up and 8-2 against the spread the last 5 years.
Going to throw one last thing in from that first meeting. And, again, that was the biggest stage for Patrick Mahomes. It was the biggest game of his career. Prior to that, it was the Monday night game at Denver, in which they did fall behind in that game, but he brought them back in the second half. And in that New England game, on the road, they were -1 in that game in turnovers. But amazingly enough, in that game, the Patriots had 0 penalties called on them. Not 1 penalty at Foxborough. Do you think that happens again here? I don't think so. I think this is a great spot for Kansas City. I'll be honest, when I first broke down the 2 games, this is the one that I thought I had the hardest time breaking down because I could make a case. Hey, it's the Patriots. You can always make a case for the Patriots.
It's still the Patriots.
But the more I look at it, I think, and I don't know where you guys put your numbers at, I think this number should be 4.5 or 5, and I think it's because of the name New England, and it's because of Belichick and Brady. That's why we're at 3.
Can you think of a better reason?
Yeah.
No, seriously.
And Andy Reid, his first playoff win, right? I mean, it was at KC.
The Chiefs are probably better than the Patriots, okay? Yeah. But I don't know. Anybody who's going to be shocked if New England wins this game is nuts.
Right.
Because, I mean, it is the Patriots.
And I can tell you that New England's going to be on a ton of teasers. Everybody's they're going to look and say,
so are the Rams.
There's no way they lose by double digits. That the people still are going to say that Kansas City defense is bad.
Well, plus the math says that's a plus even teaser.
Right.
Is the 2 dogs. Because you're getting the optimum numbers.
But
don't tease the favorites. Jesus.
Yes. And there's going to be people that are going to do it. They're going to say, "I can take the favorite to a dog." Yeah. You idiots!
And you're giving away a point in the process.
Yes. So. And Ralph, one stat that you left out. You mentioned it on videos, and I'll go ahead and do it. I'll steal your thunder, but I'll give you credit for it. New England, the last 352 games, they've only given up 40 or more points 7 times, but one team has scored 40 or more 3 times.
Yeah, that's Andy Reid coach teams, and that's all in the last 5 years. So Andy Reid has been able to dissect Bill Belichick's defense. So
and 2 of those 3 were with Alex Smith. Okay, so if he can do it with Alex Smith and dissect it, I think he's going to have success.
Dave's over is smiling a little bit more with that.
Yeah, so, all right, guys. Hey, great stuff on that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to look best bets from the 3 of us, see what we come up with. Maybe it'll be a football. Maybe it'll be a basketball. You'll find out next here when we return to the WagerTalk Podcast. Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. Before we jump into this week's best bets, I got a special offer for you guys. From myself here, guys, I've been having a great run with the basketball. My college basketball, we're taping on Thursday night, so we're going for our 7th winner in a row in college basketball. In 13-3 the last 16. Want to offer the listeners, you can pick up a 7-day package for me. Now, a 7-day package is normally $119. If you use coupon code MD79, that's MD79, you can pick up a 7-day all access. That's not just college basketball, but you're going to get everything I have to release over the next 7 days. Football, basketball, NBA, and guys, we have been absolutely killing it. 49-29 over the last 41 days, up over 61% for our clients. All right, guys, let's get into these best bets. And Dave, well, you've talked about it, and you sounded pretty confident when you did the breakdown, so you're going to make it a best bet. Tell us which one it is.
Chiefs-Patriots over the total. I don't think the weather's going to be that much of a factor. There's not any real wind projected. It's not going to be bad weather. It's just cold. Okay. It's not going to be even as cold as this Arctic, whatever.
I looked this morning.
Arctic
28
blast.
was the high, 10 was the low.
Yeah.
It's 20 degrees warmer than they thought it was going to be.
And by the way, New England kind of used to cold weather. So it's just not that big a deal. I think both offenses are in command here. The two offenses are better than the two defenses, and I think both teams will score a lot of points. And the total is really not all that imposing where it is right now. So I think it's going to start going back up now that the weather thing has been diminished. But I still like this game to get into the 60s, and I'm taking the over to the Chiefs and Patriots.
I would agree with you, Dave, and I would highly recommend, as you said, jump on that now, because as we get closer to game time, the recreational players are going to get involved, and this total's going to go back up. Plus, some of the sharps that jumped the gun with the early weather forecast, they're going to come back and buy out of it. You're going to see this game going back up. Ralph, you've got a college basketball play for us. Friday night action. Who are you looking at, my friend?
Yeah, I am really a fan of this St. Louis Billikens team, and they've made some huge strides. They play absolute lockdown defense, especially at home. St. Joe's a struggling team. They just lost another player for the year. Probably, besides West Virginia, one of my most disappointing teams there is. So I think St. Joe's offense really struggles in St. Louis. Friday night game, St. Louis -8.
I'm going to go Friday night as well, and we're going to go to the NBA. And Ralph, our good friend Brian Leonard and myself, we had a really fun video where we went at each other about so-called trap games and this and that. And I'm going to tell you, Friday night in the NBA, there is a team that is coming off a 42-point loss. They gave up 149 points in their last game, and they're going to be playing the San Antonio Spurs, a team that's been playing quite well lately. And the line is pick the winner. It's right now the overnight line for Friday is Minnesota, 1-point favorite. The average bettor is going to look at that one, Ralph, and they're going to want to take San Antonio. This is a absolute embarrassed team. Not only did they lose so bad, but it's who they lost to. They lost to Philadelphia, and it was like a final slap in the face because that is the Jimmy Butler team where he went after finally the Timberwolves traded him during the season. And as we figured, he put up a big night against his former team. And the media just ripped this Minnesota team, actually calling out their two stars that they quit in this game. You're gonna see, if they have any pride at all, you're gonna see everything Minnesota has on Friday night, playing at home in front of their crowd. I'm gonna go ahead and take Minnesota to get the win on Friday night. That's gonna be my best bet this week. And that's going to wrap up this week's show. I want to thank all of our guests, William Bernanke from CG Analytics. Big thanks to Ralph Michaels and Dave Cokin for joining me in studio. We sound good. The only reason we sound good is that guy behind the controls, Mark Seidel, making sure we sound good. And, of course, we've got to give the big shout-out to our man in Detroit, Johnny Detroit. He gets this podcast up and out to all of the various media outlets. You can subscribe to iTunes. You can listen on Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio. And, of course, last but not least, I want to thank you, our listeners. We wouldn't do this podcast every week if it wasn't for you guys. Love to hear the feedback. Reach out to us, comment on Twitter. You have any questions or anything, do it. Ralph, myself, Dave, we answer all of the Twitter questions that come our way, and we appreciate you. And for me, Marco D'Angelo, until next week, guys, enjoy these championship games in college and pro basketball on the weekend. Cash some tickets. We'll be back next week here on the WagerTalk Podcast.